We did have to have hip surgery in January where her hip was immobilized for 6-7 weeks. The atrophy that happens when you literally can't move your lower body is amazing, but she's walking. And dare I say it, she's running and chasing my dog around the house like she always has. And while there's a noticeable limp, she overcomes everything that we put in front of her, and she's a great kid. And my wife and I are actually just remarking to one another the other day about how happy she is. She's an extremely happy kid, despite everything.
That's Brian Lynch, one of David Hirsch's guests on this Dad to Dad podcast. And when we say Dad to Dad, that's exactly what we have today. Because Brian is David's guest, but so is Brian's dad, Allen. Brian has a daughter, Cailinn, who was diagnosed early in her life with a rare chromosome disorder, while Allen, the father, is one of the few recipients of the Medal of Honor. We'll hear all about this and more on this Dad to Dad podcast. Here's our host, David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
So let's listen now to this fascinating conversation between David Hirsch and Allen and Brian Lynch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Brian Lynch of Muskego, Wisconsin, and his father, Allen Lynch of Gurnee, Illinois. Brian is the father of one and the director of talent acquisition at Akara Solutions. Allen is the father of three, a Vietnam veteran, a recipient of the Medal of Honor, and retired from the Department of Veterans Affairs in 2005, where he advocated for increased benefits for disabled veterans. Brian and Allen, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Not a problem. Glad to be here.
Thanks.
For the record, I've done more than 100 interviews for the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I'd like to acknowledge this is the first father-son interview, with hopes that it won't be the last. Brian, you and your wife, Kelly, have been married for 14 years. Allen, you and your wife, Susan, have been married for 50 years. Congratulations. And are the proud parents of three children, Eric, Cailinn, and Brian. Let's start with some background. Allen, where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Well, I grew up in Roseland. I was there till I was about 6, and then 7 years old, and we moved to Homewood. And then I spent the rest of my time in grade school and junior high in a place called Lake Eliza, Indiana. And then for high school, I moved back to Dalton, Illinois, and graduated high school there and went into the Army for 4.5 years. Spent time in Germany, in Berlin. And then I did a tour in Vietnam and came home, got out of the Army April 25th, 1969. Met Susie, I think, in July or August of that year. We were married a year later, April 25th, 1970. We've been married 50 years this year. I worked for the Department of Veteran Affairs for about 12 years, and then the Vietnam Veterans Leadership Program for about 2 or 3. And then I went to the Illinois Attorney General's office, where I worked as the chief of the Veterans Rights Bureau and retired from there in 2005.
I'm sort of curious to know, what did your dad do for a living?
My dad was he was a welder, journeyman welder. He was a journeyman machinist. My dad was a jack of all trades. He could do electrical work, he could do plumbing, and he taught me a lot of that stuff.
And how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
It was really good and really bad. It was the full spectrum. There were times when he and I would just go at it, like, especially when I became an adult and, got home from the Army and had my own kind of way of doing things. And he had his viewpoint, I had mine, and, we'd lock horns. But we made peace over the years and got along pretty good. But we had a kind of a fun, rocky relationship. My dad and I both loved to argue, so that made it fun.
It sounds like it was a roller coaster. And most of our listeners wouldn't appreciate this, but I know that you live near Six Flags Great America.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that your relationship was a lot of ups and downs and probably twists and turns.
The American Eagle.
So thinking about your dad, is there any important takeaway that comes to mind, something, a lesson learned, an important lesson?
He taught me to have great pleasure in work. It took a long time for me to learn that, but it was, I still, even now, I'm 74, I've been retired since 2005. I still have a strong work ethic. And it's something that I find that if I don't work during the day, I'm not a happy man.
One would argue that he works harder now than he did when he was actually gainfully employed.
Pretty much, yeah.
Thanks for adding that, Brian. Why don't we use that as a segue? Brian, where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
I grew up in Gurnee, Illinois, right here in this house that my dad and I are sitting in right now, and pretty happy childhood. My mom and dad really spared no expense to make sure that we had everything we needed. And when you look back on growing up, you definitely realize that they spared no expense to make sure that we could get to school with a full stomach and had clothes on our back and, all the advantages that they could afford. So it was really a good, happy childhood for sure.
And this is a little bit more difficult for me to ask since you're in the presence of your father, but how would you describe the relationship with your father?
Well, I mean, he was definitely hard on me when he needed to be hard on me. He was a great friend and a good confidant. And definitely got into it when I was a teenager quite a bit. I'm a very competitive person and can be hot-blooded, or was a lot more hot-blooded back then than I am now. And so we definitely butted heads in my adolescence, but as an adult, we've become great friends. I mean, there's no one I talk to more than my dad, and there's no one I trust more than my dad. He's a role model, my hero, great man.
Yeah, what a great testimony. Thank you for sharing, Brian. I noticed there's a pattern. I think you both mentioned that you butted heads with your dads.
Me more so when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Nothing stupid.
Yeah.
I think I can remember my grandfather and my dad kind of getting into it when my dad was an adult. But.
Okay. Well, maybe it's being weaned out of the Lynch family then.
We're hoping.
Yeah, we'll see.
So is there any important takeaway, Brian, that comes to mind, if you had to synthesize it to one or two things?
To have honor. Your word is everything. I don't think my grandfather's work ethic got down to me until I became an adult, which I'm very grateful for, but I don't think that was as present growing up as it was for maybe my dad. But I think, having honor and being a man of your word and doing things the right way and being, a moral person is really the basis of who I am and who I try to be. I really feel like my value system came from my father and my mom, and I owe a lot to them for that. So, but yes, I think those are the big things.
Okay, that's wonderful. And it's not lost on me that to be able to say those things in the presence of your father, I'm just thinking about it from a father's perspective, it really touches your heart. We came in contact with one another a little bit through the Illinois Fatherhood Initiative, and you might remember that one of the things that organization does is it has children write essays. We've had well over 400,000 kids write essays about their dads, stepdads, granddads, and father figures. And what we've learned is that one of the most direct ways to touch the heart of a father is through the words of his children. So when I hear you speaking those words, in your dad's presence, I just know that it means a lot. So again, thanks for sharing. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about careers. And Brian, I'm going to let you go first. So after you graduated from high school, where did your education and career take you?
Not to a great place. I wasn't meant to go to college, but I did. It's what my brother and sister did. It's, I think, what my parents wanted me to do. I was not a great student. I like to think that I'm an intelligent person, but I was not a great student by any stretch of the imagination. So I did go to Western Illinois for one semester. It was not the right fit for me. I came home. I went to community college here in Lake County, kind of bounced around between that and working full time. And then I went back to school full time to a small private school, Division III school in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which is just outside Milwaukee, called Carroll College. And was there for just a couple of years, and all my friends who were my age were graduating, and I wasn't close to graduation at that point. I had decided I wanted to be a police officer, so I decided to leave school at that point and started testing. And like so many recruiters, if you talk to any recruiter, whether they're a corporate recruiter, a staffing recruiter, or a headhunter or something like that, they will tell you that they never planned to become a recruiter. They didn't go to school to become a recruiter. They just kind of fell into it. And that's what happened to me. Is as I was testing to be a police officer, I needed a job. So I started temping through Manpower at Abbott Labs. I got into benefits administration and HR. And then the next thing I know, I started recruiting for a little medical clinic in Milwaukee as I moved up there to be closer to friends from school. And of course, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I realized I'm really good at this recruiting thing. It's competitive. It's dollar driven. You're helping people at the same time. You're helping people find their next career opportunity. So it was just a really great fit for who I am as a person, and sort of kismet, right? It was just sort of fate that I fell into that.
Okay, Al, it's your turn. You're coming out of high school. I think the way you described it, if I remember, is you were sort of a knucklehead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You didn't know what you wanted to do. What was it that led to you joining the Army, and where did that take you?
I had nowhere else to go, and I knew I was going to get drafted. I was too stupid for college. I was not interested in the trades. I wasn't interested. All I wanted to do in high school was to get through it and never, ever, ever open another textbook and just be left alone, find a job, some factory somewhere, kind of a laborer, do whatever. But I knew I was going to get drafted. So I joined the Army, and it completely changed everything. I started to get motivated. I started to get past the kid that was bullied, and started to get some confidence in myself. And then finally I went to Vietnam, and that just put me on a whole different trajectory. It was what do they say? It's a paradigm shift from one kid to somebody entirely different. And then the Medal of Honor course changed my life completely.
Well, describe for me, if you will, what your experience in Vietnam was, and then up until that sort of fateful day in December 1969, from what I remember.
Well, I was an infantry guy, and we went on patrols and ambushes and observation posts, and did all of those things, saw a lot of combat. July, my best friend was killed, which is Brian was named after him. When I finally remembered his name, at least part of it, it's a long story, but it was a lot of air assaults and a lot of combat and a lot of stuff like that. And then December 15th, we walked into an ambush, and some of our guys got wounded. Our point men, one of our point men came running back and got shot halfway out. And I went out and got him, and he said that Casares was, badly wounded. And I was an RTL, radio telephone operator, so I dropped my radio and left it with my lieutenant. Tried to get him, and just as I'm figuring on how do I get him back with his M16 and all the stuff that he was carrying, the Sparza comes running across and gets shot, and I went out and got him. So we're all in this ditch together, and we were there about 3-4 hours, and then finally I was able to get them out and get them to safety. And then when I got pulled out of the field for a couple of days, because I was a little bit of a mess, holding it together and dealing with wounded and trying to maintain all that control. And then when it was all over, it was just like a great big. So I went back into the rear with the gear, and when I rejoined my unit, they said they put me in for the Medal of Honor, and I kind of laughed it off as, it wasn't that big a deal. And we got married the day before Susie and I were going to get married. I was notified I was going to get it. It was almost, 2 years later.
Wasn't there a story that goes behind that?
Yeah. I
thought there was like a police car or something that was involved.
Yeah, I have this problem with my right foot. I like to speed. And there was this S-curve in Dalton, and I took it before I went to Vietnam, and I figured, it worked then. It may work now. And, well, it has. 50 years later, we're still married, but I took that curve rather fast, and it was broad daylight. So I wasn't hitting 80 like I did before I went to Vietnam. but I hit it pretty fast. So I noticed this police officer following me, and I'm driving down the road, and he's following, and I'm slowing down, and he slows down. I'm like, oh my God, here we go. So I turn, nonchalantly down the street where I live. I turn into my driveway. He follows me, and I'm going, here we go. Well, maybe I can tell him I'm getting married. I was a little nervous, give him the Vietnam story, So I get out of the car. I said, officer, can I help you? And I'm waiting for you were going very, very fast, blah, blah, blah. And it was, is your name Allen Lynch? I said, yes. He says, your social security number this? I said, yes. He hands me a piece of paper, call that number, gets back in his car. I go, wait, what? He says, it's a good thing. Just call that number. Took me quite a while to find you. And I noticed he's from Alsip, which is like 3 towns over. So I call that number. I get some colonel. I get the same thing. And he says, well, I have the great honor to tell you that you're going to be receiving the Medal of Honor from President Nixon on Flag Day. Or Armed Forces Day, I'm sorry. And I'm like, but I'm getting married tomorrow. And he says, well, we'd appreciate it if you didn't tell anybody. I'm like, last thing in the world I want to do is tell anybody. Being married tomorrow. I got other things on my mind, not realizing what's going on here. So, of course, I told my mom and dad, and I told her mom and my brother-in-law. And I was actually a little bit not happy that my mom and dad were more excited about me getting the Medal of Honor than getting married. I'm like, really? But they actually never believed that I was going to get that because I was bullied, through grade school and part of high school and that. So it was like, you're kind of gutless. How can you go to Vietnam and earn a Medal of Honor?
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful story. So what was it like going to the White House and actually receiving the Medal of Honor?
Well, I'm a working class kid from a working class neighborhood. I'm making sausage at Libby McNeil and Libby back then and throwing beef hearts and pork loins around. And here I am one day in the White House and, in my uniform wearing sergeant stripes and meeting President Nixon and his daughter Julie and Westmoreland, all of these big shots. And I'm like, what in the world am I doing here? Do they know who I am? I'm a working stiff from the south side of Chicago, for crying out loud. So it was strange, to say the least.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a surreal experience. One of the images that comes to mind, and I don't mean to compare you to anybody else, but the movie Forrest Gump, where this ordinary guy just from nowhere.
That's not the first time, David, that's come up.
Okay. But there's a parallel there. I don't know how strong the parallel is, Al, but there's a parallel there.
I would like to think not very. Run, Forrest, run. That part, yeah, maybe.
Well, thanks for sharing. So how did life change after that for you? I know that your career, like you had outlined earlier, taken a little bit different trajectory, but what was it that was on your mind from that point forward?
All we wanted to do was have a family. I went to work for the Department of Veteran Affairs, ended up at Great Lakes Naval Base taking care of Vietnam returnees. I loved the job. It was giving back and getting paid for it, so it was what's not to like. But throughout the 70s, from the time I got the medal up until the dedication of the Vietnam Memorial, it was pretty much go to work, go home, rinse and repeat, raise kids. Got involved in Little League with Eric and Girl Scouts with Cailinn and baseball with Brian and soccer, and just life went on. And then with the dedication, lead up to the dedication of the Vietnam Memorial, I started doing a lot more public speaking and going out, and finally left the VA and went to work for the leadership program for a couple of years and started doing a lot of public speaking and a lot of motivational stuff. And then I went to the Attorney General's office and started getting into casework and, doing a lot of claims. I only could do appeals before the VA, and I was really good at it. But it's been a great career, and I really enjoyed everything I did about it. When I retired with the idea of I've given everything back. Now I'm just going to retire and live the good life. And that lasted 1 year. And I lost 35 pounds because I was hitting the gym. I was walking every day. I was going to the golf course and playing golf. I was doing everything I wanted to do. And then it all crashed in 2006. They brought the Medal of Honor Society convention to Chicago for 2009. I started working with that. My daughter-in-law, Mary Frances, was diagnosed with lung cancer. And so we started, doing stuff with their family, and Brian got married, and we were looking forward to all of that kind of stuff. It was one of those tough years. And then it got tougher.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. One of the things I admire most about you is the fact that you dedicated a lot of your career to helping other veterans, right, as a fellow veteran. And I can only imagine how purposeful that has been for you to advocate for other men, and I guess more recently women who've served. And it's very honorable. And I know that one of the things that has brought us together is that I've had a chance to attend a number of these Medal of Honor galas and events. And there aren't too many of you. I don't know the exact number, but my recollection is that there are only about 80 living individuals who've been recipients of the Medal of Honor. And that's a pretty small number, considering that in our country's history that more than 3,000 people have been bestowed with the Medal of Honor. Mm-hmm. Each of the individuals, I've only met maybe 30 or 40 of you, but there's this sort of sense of service, a sense of humility that I don't see in many people. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, I think across the board, most of us don't think that we should have gotten it. We were just doing what any other soldier would have done at the time. And that makes you kind of humble. It's the idea is that there, but for the grace of God, somebody wrote something a little bit better. And so and I think most of us have that same idea is that, this isn't really ours. We're holding it. We're wearing it. Yeah, we get all the benefits. We get to do all these things, but there comes great responsibility with it too. And most of us don't take that lightly. We look at it as, I'd like to quit and do other things, but I was given this. And with great things like that, you have great responsibility. But I don't think you should take it lightly. I don't think any of us do.
And I consider that he's probably one of the most humble people I've ever met. And most of the Medal of Honor recipients I've had the opportunity to meet, they're all extremely humble.
Well, Brian, I'm wondering from your perspective, when did you realize what the Medal of Honor is and what it represents? And how did that impact you, or how do you think it impacted you and your siblings?
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny. I was probably in junior high or maybe a freshman in high school, and a friend of mine was doing a book report or history paper or something and asked if he could interview my dad. And I remember him wrapping up the interview, and as young boys do, they tend to glorify the violent piece. I remember him saying, "Your dad's a badass." And I'm like, really? My dad? And sure enough, and in my group of friends, my circle of buddies, he became this sort of almost mythological figure.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting perspective that very, very few people would have. If you think about it, Brian, if there's only 80 living individuals who've received the Medal of Honor, some of them are quite young, the guys that have just served in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's very few people that are alive today, Brian, that are the offspring of a Medal of Honor recipient. So that's why I was sort of curious to know, what, if any, impact that it had on you, good or bad, for that matter.
I think a lot of the value system that he imparted on me came from that humility, right? And I think he would have been a humble person regardless of whether he was decorated or not. That's just who he is. He's a humble guy and puts others first. And I think my brother, sister, and I, we do the same thing. We put others first. At least we try to.
Well, I just want to emphasize the point you're making about the humility. And I remember being at the dinner that, Al, you were recognized at for the Illinois Fatherhood Initiative. And we've been doing this dinner for 24 years now. I've heard a lot of very memorable presentations, but there's very few that I can actually remember, right? And one of the things that you said, I'm going to paraphrase, when you got up and spoke, you had said that this honor, being recognized as a dad and a grandpa, means more to me than receiving the Medal of Honor. And then you went on to say why that is. Do you remember that?
A little bit, yeah.
And you'd said, again, I'm paraphrasing, I was 20-something years old. I was amped up on adrenaline. I did what I was trained to do. And it was just like a very short period of time of my life. But being a dad is a lifetime commitment. That's really hard, right? That's really challenging. And I will never forget that, right? It was just like a light bulb clicked on, right? And, you put things in perspective. And, most people have a enormous reverence for people that have received the Medal of Honor for logical reasons. And you making that statement publicly really meant a lot, right? It just helped put this important role that we have as dads into perspective. So I just want to thank you again for sharing those thoughts.
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, you do something in the spur of the moment, your adrenaline's going crazy, but to be a dad, to be a consistent dad, to do the best you know how, because, the nice thing would be is if kids, when they came out of the womb, came out with a little instruction book. At the age 15, he's going to be kind of a jerk, but he's going to get over it. And, you got to do this to make him happy or to discipline him or whatever. And then you could kind of look at the book. But every kid is so different, every different personality. So to be a dad or to be a mom, to be a parent, and to know what is best for your child, and it's all trial and error. I mean, when you get right down to it, you succeed and you fail a lot. And I failed a lot. I mean, good Lord. I'm surprised sometimes they talk to me.
Let's switch gears and talk about special needs. Brian, I'm sort of curious to know, before Cailinn was born, did you or Kelly have any experience with special needs?
I did not, but Kelly did. She actually, it's kind of funny. Cailinn, prior to COVID, would attend a summer program called the Irving Summer Program, which is geared for children with special needs. And it is literally Caillinn's second favorite thing to do. She loves school. That school's number one. She goes to bed asking to go to school, and she wakes up saying, "Can we go to school?" But the next thing that she usually asks for is camp. She'll sign camp. She'll go, camp. Because she loves the Irving Summer Program more so than anything. And Kelly actually volunteered in high school and junior high at the Irving Summer Program. So I think, to be able to send Cailinn to that program that Kelly volunteered at was just really cool for Kelly.
Well, thanks for sharing and being authentic about that. And I'm sort of curious now, Caillinn's 12. What is her diagnosis and how did it transpire?
Yeah, she doesn't have necessarily a syndrome associated with her, like Down syndrome or Crucial or something like that. She is an undiagnosed chromosomal translocation of her 5 and 9 chromosomes. So she has a deletion on one chromosome and an addition on another chromosome, which has caused a lot of her health issues and emotional intelligent delays, I guess. She also has a deletion off of another chromosome. It's just sort of 1 in a billion, literally. There's just no other kid who's been diagnosed with these specific chromosomes involved in her deletions and additions. The only other children that have been documented were in England, and there were 4 cases, and they all passed away before the age of 4.
Thanks.
So Cailinn she's really in uncharted territory, and from a special needs standpoint, we have a lot of clinics and a lot of specialists that we see and have seen throughout her life.
So at what age was she diagnosed, or what were the indications that something wasn't just right?
2 weeks old. Well,
oh my!
I guess we realized something wasn't right when she was born. I remember in the delivery room, and I remember kind of looking at her going, "This isn't right." And the nurses took her from I gave her to my wife, and then the nurses took her from her and took her to the NICU because she needed oxygen. Her O2 saturation was pretty low, so they took her to the NICU at that point. And then my wife and I were really overjoyed that she was born, but at the same time there was sort of a melancholy concern, because I think we knew that there was something significantly wrong. And the doctor's reaction was, the doctor was great, actually, but we knew based on his reaction that there were some other things going on. It was the next day that they came in and they said that they wanted to take a tube of blood from just a pinprick to do some genetic analysis on her. It was sort of disbelief. I think both of us were kind of like, this is going to be fine. But then the genetics came back a few days later, and that's when they had diagnosed her with this chromosomal translocation.
And what's transpired since then as far as her development physically or intellectually? How would you describe that?
So we were in the NICU for about 4 weeks at West Dallas Hospital. We went through a couple of doctors. We had a doctor who was convinced that we should give her a do not resuscitate, so she were a code that we wouldn't do anything life-saving. We had some imaging done of her heart, imaging done of her skull, and a few other things. And the imaging of her heart revealed that she had an ASD and a VSD, which is a atrial septal defect and a ventricular septal defect. Basically, she had two significant holes in her heart. We have a 4-chambered heart. She, at the time, had a 2-chambered heart. So they knew she was going to need significant heart surgery if she was going to survive. She also had a really small airway, which was the reason she was on oxygen and a few other things. So I think at 4 weeks old and about 6 pounds, we weren't really ready to have her go through that heart surgery. We didn't want her to suffer if, this wasn't going to work out long term, but we wanted to give her every opportunity to survive. So we went home on oxygen in a feeding tube, and, she started gaining weight. She started getting bigger and getting more robust. And when she reached about 10 pounds, she started having these episodes where she would turn gray. And we ended up taking her to Children's Hospital, Wisconsin at that point, which was probably the best move we've done. We had her at West Dallas Memorial, which is a great hospital, but Children's Hospital opened up a whole new world for us. And that world included putting a tracheostomy in to help her breathe better. And then suddenly Cailinn comes to life. She can breathe better. We get her first smile. Granted, it was assisted by opiates at the time, but still it was a smile. She starts growing and getting bigger, and then the doctors feel confident that they can go in and do the heart surgery and that she'll survive this really, honestly, the invasive surgical procedure. And the crazy thing is the surgery was scheduled for my wife's birthday. So we had the whole family there, my parents, my wife's parents, my siblings, my wife's siblings. We're all sitting in the waiting room having cake while my daughter is having open heart surgery at 5 months old. It was really a surreal time in our life, but as she, came out of surgery, great. And then the next thing is Cailinn just starts progressing, and we start getting rid of the attachments. At 4 years old, we got rid of the tracheostomy. At 6 years old, we got rid of her feeding tube. We had some bumps in the road where she had a gluten intolerance, where we had to have her on PICC line and a few other things. But there's a myriad of procedures and scans and imagings that we've had to do. But Cailinn right now is a really healthy, really happy kid. We did have to have hip surgery in January, where her hip was immobilized for 6-7 weeks. The atrophy that happens when you literally can't move your lower body is amazing, but she's walking. And dare I say it, she's running and chasing my dog around the house like she always has. And while there's a noticeable limp, and she's going to have the other hip done in probably a few months, she overcomes everything that we put in front of her, and she's a great kid. She's really, and my wife and I were actually just remarking to one another the other day about how happy she is. She's an extremely happy kid, despite everything.
Well, the first thought that comes to mind, Brian, and thank you for sharing, it sounds like it's been an extraordinary experience for you and your family.
Yeah, like my dad said, we didn't get a handbook.
Yeah, I'm almost speechless, but the word that comes to mind is miracle, right?
For sure.
She is definitely a miracle baby or a miracle child now. And it's just testimony to having some faith and just doing the best you can. Like you said, there's not a handbook or instructions. You just have to make the best decisions, sort of in the moment, and just have some faith that things are going to be okay.
Yeah. We put our faith in God that, he's going to do the right things for us and for Cailinn. And that, if at some point that meant, we weren't going to have her here anymore, we knew she was going to be in a much better spot. I'm not a good Christian, but I am a Christian. And I put a lot of my faith in Jesus Christ that he's going to, help take care of things, and we're going to be okay in the long run. So that's a comforting thought.
Are there any organizations, Brian, that you and your family have relied on? You mentioned Children's Hospital of Wisconsin being a game changer. Have there been any other organizations that have made an instrumental difference in Cailinn's development? Yeah,
I mean, her PT and her physical therapy and speech therapy clinic, which is New Berlin Therapies, and Curative through the Medical College of Wisconsin have been amazing partners. I never thought I was going to see my daughter ride a bike. She rode a bike right after her hip surgery. It was amazing. They put her on a bike. She gets the brace off and she starts pedaling. It's just amazing. I mean, it's not a bike, but it's a tricycle. I'll tell you, there's an organization up by us. I would be remiss if I didn't mention them, but Katie's Closet. It's a nonprofit medical product warehouse where, if you're done with, let's say, like a shower chair, like we needed a shower chair for Cailinn when she was in her brace to give her baths. If you're done with that shower chair, you take that to Katie's Closet, and then somebody else can come and grab it. All kinds of stuff. It's a great organization called Katie's Closet.
Yeah, well, thanks for mentioning. We'll be sure to include Kate's Closet in our show notes so that if anybody is curious or interested in learning more about what they do, that they can find that. So, Grandpa, I'm wondering, from your perspective, what has this journey looked like during the last 12 years since Caitlin's arrival?
I think a couple of things. Cailinn came right at the time where Mary Frances's cancer was getting pretty bad. And we didn't know how we were going to get through all this. I mean, you have one family losing a mom. Caillin's born special needs. We're spending a lot of time going up to the hospital when she was hospitalized. And we're watching her, so Kelly and Brian could get out of the house occasionally and go to work and whatever. So we got very close. I got especially close to Cailinn because Susan was working. So I would go up during the week to relieve Kelly so she'd go home and get a shower when Cailinn was in the hospital. So I held her a lot, and they called me the bouncing grandpa because I'd, hold her and I'd bounce, So we have a thing. In fact, thank God it worked out right, but Cailinn walked to me first.
There's a video of it.
And there's a video of it. And then she walked to Kelly, and I was like, dear God, please. But Cailinn has she has this way of making your bad days good. There is not a time that we've watched her that we haven't been really tired, but spend the next week going, oh, that Cailinn, you see what she did? I watched her about 3-4 weeks ago. I went up, I was watching her, and here she is. She's laying on the couch. She has her iPad in one hand, manipulating it with one hand. She has the TV thing in the other hand and turning the channel on the TV and doing them both at the same time. I can't do that. And occasionally she does this thing where she gets, you could just see the little gray cells working. It's like, how can I get over on somebody? So she'll go up to the other room, and we'll be watching TV and having a conversation or whatever. And all of a sudden you hear this loud volume of Elmo. And I'm not getting enough attention, so I'm going to get some. So she's an amazing kid. She's just an amazing kid. She has just her own personality. I know that people that have met her that have just said, she just makes me feel good. she's one of those kids.
That's just the kind of kid she is. Like she would rather play with people and give people hugs and make them feel better than she would play with a toy or anything like that. She's just a really, really good
There's the Cailinn goodbye will be sitting on the porch, and she'll decide she wants to go in and play in the bedroom. Well, she has to go around and kiss everybody goodbye and give them all a hug.
I love it. I think you mentioned, and I just want to be clear about this, is she nonverbal?
Well, she's got about 50 signs, and she's got mama, dada, grandma, grandpa, school, go, and then she uses a software on her iPad called Proloquo to Go, where she will point to pictures and it'll speak for her. But she does sentence structure, and she knows her colors and her numbers, and I'm barely convinced that she can read. It's like a new development. I'm pretty sure she can read, but that's not proven yet.
She makes herself known. What she wants, she knows what she wants, and she knows how to get it.
Yeah.
In no uncertain terms.
And Al, I have an explanation. You probably know this, for why she can do things with the remote control and an iPad simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's very simple. She's a digital native. That's all people her age know is digital things.
Yes. Can't work a computer, get a 14-year-old.
Help me figure this out.
So I'd like to spend just a moment talking about your book, Al, the title of which is Zero to Hero.
This is the life story of Al Lynch in his own words, an American hero who is now one of only 72 living Medal of Honor recipients. This is the story of a man whose life came into sharp focus when, in a deadly firefight in Vietnam, he rushed in to rescue 3 wounded soldiers in no man's land. He was urged to leave the wounded and return to a safe position, but Al Lynch refused to retreat in order to stay with his men. By the writing of Zero to Hero, Al shows us the stuff of which heroes are made.
I'm wondering if you can give us sort of the backstory, because it's really like a autobiography, isn't it?
Yeah.
You came from some pretty humble beginnings, like you had mentioned, but I'm wondering if you can share with our listening audience what that story is all about.
Well, it's just about growing up. I was bullied pretty bad when I was in grade school, and then a little bit in high school. But by the time I got to high school, my self-image was so bad, I didn't have any. I was just basically this guy. I just wanted to be left alone. Just let me graduate high school. I don't want to go to prom. In fact, I didn't go to prom. I wasn't in any clubs. I just wanted to be done with it. And I was pretty much pushed into writing, and I really didn't want to write it. But I had a number of my friends tell me that I really need to, write this book because it's very important, that kids that are getting bullied and going through bad times need to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And being a Medal of Honor recipient, going to Vietnam, suffering post-traumatic stress disorder and all of that kind of thing, kind of pushed that point. So I decided to write. It took me about a year and a half to actually get it done. But when I started doing it, I wanted to tell kids that teenager and grade school and high school is just a chapter, as is college. Your life is made up of chapters. You never know what that first chapter that you have, or how that's going to set you up for the next chapter of your life. And then dealing with PTSD, I wanted people to know that you can fight the dragon, you can defeat the dragon. You may have to fight them like I do every day, but it's a battle you can win, and you can keep winning. And if you lose today, there's tomorrow that you can refight it. The one thing I wanted to make clear in there too is you have to have faith in something bigger than yourself. For me, my belief in the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior, that has carried me through all the worst times in my life. And even when I was doing things I'm not very proud I was doing, there was that background of faith that brought me through it.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. I've read the book. I think it's an amazing journey that you've been on. And there's some real important lessons, takeaways for lots of different audiences. So thanks for taking the time to put those thoughts into writing. And I know that for a number of years now, you've also been doing work in something called the Allen J. Lynch Foundation. And I'm wondering, what's the backstory on that? Who are you serving? And how can somebody get involved?
We're working with other veteran organizations such as Naperville Response for Veterans, Lake County Response for Veterans, the All Women's Honor Flight. And what we want to do is raise money to give to veterans organizations that provide a difference, that make a difference in veterans' lives.
Yeah, well, I know that you've done some great work and you're changing people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about advice now, and I'm wondering if there are any important takeaways that come to mind. And I'm going to let you go first, Brian, from a father's perspective about raising a child with differences.
I would say don't be afraid to put your marriage first, because if that's on rocky footing, that's going to ultimately impact the child. Don't be afraid to do a little bit of self-care. One thing I heard this somewhere, but like when you're sailing, you have one hand for the ship and one hand for yourself. And I've had to have conversations with my wife where it's like, you don't have a hand on for yourself. You're doing everything you can for our kid, which is great. And that's amazing. And that's what makes you a great mom. But if you are so exhausted at the end of the day that you can't, take care of her anymore, or you get sick, ultimately that doesn't help her. So you've got to keep yourself in mind to a certain extent. I think most parents have that innate self-sacrifice for their kids. Like, I think the advice that I would give any new parent that has a special needs child is you're going to feel like you can, or you want to self-sacrifice, and that's a good thing. I'm not really worried about parents who are maybe going to neglect that child, but don't neglect yourself and don't neglect your marriage, because those two things that's what's really going to give you that longevity to really care for that child over a long period of time. And that's what it's going to require. We're, constantly thinking about what is Caillinn's life going to be like when we're not here, so we're saving financially, we're planning, we have a trust set up for her. We've done a lot of those financial things. And, while we might feel antisocial at times because it's a lot and you're exhausted at the end of the day, we force ourselves to get together with friends, because if God forbid something were to happen to us, that community, that group of friends, family, they're the ones who are going to be here to help Cailinn move on with her life. And so I think self-care, taking care of the marriage, and then focusing on that community that you build up around you and having faith in something is probably the best advice I could provide.
Yeah, well, pearls of wisdom. Thank you for sharing. I think of the importance of your marriage, and taking care of yourself is foundational, right? And if you're not paying attention to the foundation, that the other stuff is in jeopardy. So well said. How about from your perspective, Al? Any pearls of wisdom from a grandfather's perspective on how you can be present, and any advice that you would offer?
Yeah, I think, to just amplify what Brian said, I think the thing that impressed me with Brian and Kelly throughout the years was, I'll never forget many, when she was still a baby, it was Cailinn joined our life, we didn't join hers. And I think the idea is that we're together, she's part of us now, but we don't stop living because we have a special needs kid. And I think that's actually benefited Cailinn quite a bit, because there's this amazing socialization that went on with Cailinn. She wasn't that kid that, was sitting over there in the chair. She was that kid that was active and was involved and was doing things and was going, and, and I think that's made her an amazing kid.
Yeah, she's not shy of any of
it. Oh, no. No.
So I'm sort of curious to know why each of you has agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network.
I want to help people. And I have a unique set of skills. It's hard to be a special needs dad. If I can give back, that'd be great.
It's the same thing. It's all about giving back. It's about helping other people. We're all, as we've heard thousands of times over the last few weeks, we're all in this together, and we really are. So if one of us can help, if something we says help somebody else through a dark night, that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you for being part of the Special Fathers Network. Out of curiosity, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, just thank you for the time. Really appreciate the opportunity to share our story, and we're really close. I love my dad. He's my hero.
He's my buddy.
Could not have asked for better parents. My mom and dad have been amazing parents and a huge support for what, my wife and I have had to go through with our daughter, and Cailinn loves her grandparents. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
In the end, it's all about family. It's all about, I've got 2 great sons. I've got a wonderful daughter. I've got some great grandkids, and, family gets you through a lot of hard times.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. So if somebody wants to learn more about the Allen J. Lynch Foundation, get a copy of your book, contact you or Brian, what's the best way about going to do that?
They can go to the ajlynchfoundation.org. We have our own webpage. We got a Facebook page. And the book is available on Amazon and through the Pritzker Military Library and Museum in Chicago.
I wrote the first review on Amazon of your book.
Thank you. Yes, he did.
I gave it 3 stars.
I couldn't give the old man 4.
Yeah, well, I think I wrote a review, and not to outdo you, Brian, but I'm pretty sure I gave him 5 stars.
Thank you very much.
Email is the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay. I'll include that in the show notes then as well. Brian and Al, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Brian and Al are just 2 dads who are part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation. I would really appreciate your support. Please also post a review on iTunes, share the podcast with family and friends, and subscribe so you get a reminder when each new episode is produced. Brian and Al, thanks again.
And thank you for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, presented by the Special Fathers Network. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for fathers to support fathers. Go to 21stcenturydads.org. That's 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. The Dad to Dad podcast is produced by Couch Audio for the Special Fathers Network. Thanks for listening.